Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today we're taking a look at another incredible upcoming space sci-fi strategy game that I've been following for the better part of a year now. Nebulous Fleet Command is a tactical space combat game with a serious consideration for hard sci-fi elements and a focus on representing theoretical realities of space combat in as grounded a way as possible. I've been very excited about this game as I've watched its development through constant updates on social media for quite some time, and when I finally got to sit down and play it for the last couple of months, I somehow got even more excited about the prospects of the final game. I thought I was already as excited as I could be, but I was mistaken. I love this kind of stuff, where you have to actually apply yourself to win, where it's not just about being the fastest clicker in the West, but about foresight, planning, and execution. This is yet another game that gives me those Expanse vibes, where time to target matters as missiles fly across massive distances, hoping to evade PDT fire using celestial bodies to mask their approach, where running silent is a real consideration, where turning your radar on and off can make the difference between life and death, and where the facing of a ship determines what it can see and how easily it can be seen. But now I'm just rambling because I'm excited to share, so let's get back on track. If you like what you see today, folks, don't hesitate to wishlist the game on Steam. I'll have a link in the description down below, and adding a game to your wishlist really helps indie devs out because of how Steam algorithms and visibility and stuff works. With that said, let's dive in, shall we? 6 degrees of freedom and moving in space. This might sound like an extremely simple point at first, but hang on as I elaborate. Some of the biggest sticking points with games centered around space combat are the concepts of elevation and the idea that there is no up in space. While there are certainly games where the exclusion or obfuscation of one or both of these two elements is perfectly reasonable, in my opinion, with a core gameplay loop centered specifically around combat, Nebulous Fleet Command not only includes these considerations, but makes them crucial elements that feed into other factors as well. Now, 6 degrees of freedom goes beyond just the addition of vertical movement though. It includes pitch, yaw, and roll, and as you can imagine, the side of your ship that's facing any given direction will determine what equipment you can use in said direction. It'll also determine how much of your ship is exposed to danger from said direction, and which components specifically are exposed to said danger from said direction. With positioning and angles playing such an important role, as you might imagine, you can have some pretty precise control over it all. A generic movement order will allow you to determine the end position of any given unit. You can use waypoints to navigate around celestial bodies, and the ship will determine the most time-efficient facing to accomplish your move order. Since the most powerful thrusters on a ship are typically on its back, it'll fly roughly nose forward throughout your movement order to ensure maximum velocity headed to each point. If the ship ends up engaging another with its turrets en route, it might adjust its roll to get a clean shot if needed, but otherwise, it'll look to go from point A to point B, while looking at point B as directly as possible. As you might imagine, this isn't always ideal for a couple of reasons. You could be exposing the broadside of your ship to enemy positions, and this means you could either eat some hard hits or be spotted more easily than you'd like, something we'll touch on in just a little bit. So you can opt instead to orbit around a central point if you're confident about an enemy position, or you can opt to lock your ship's heading to a specific direction so the nose will always point in that direction. If you have a rough idea of where the enemy ships might be, this might help you present a smaller profile in that general direction, no matter how or where you move. The issue with orbiting or setting a heading is that your ship won't prioritize velocity in the direction of its destination, using smaller thrusters as needed to maintain the required heading for either order type instead, meaning those powerful rear thrusters might see minimal use. You can also specify roll separately, and you'll typically want to do this to make sure your most powerful detection systems are pointing in the direction you suspect an enemy ship might be. Radar has blind spots, so rolling to adjust for those blind spots can make the difference between spotting an ambush and being obliterated by it. The freedom to move any which way in Nebulous Fleet Command isn't just as sort of a cool bullet point, it's an integral part of your tactical tool belt, essential for gathering intel and for staying alive. On which note, let's discuss stealth and electronic warfare. If you've watched me play or talk about sci-fi and modern war strategy games, you'll have heard me talk about my fascination with electronic warfare, with the concepts of beyond visual range combat, the idea of radar shadows, evasion, signatures, so on and so forth. With a few relatively simple mechanics, Nebulous Fleet Command applies these concepts and opens up a variety of strategies and approaches and adds to the believability of the combat scenarios. As discussed previously, radar systems have blind spots during regular usage, and so ships that are hoping to spot the enemy will need to adjust their facing in a way that has the detection systems pointing in the correct general direction. What we didn't touch on earlier, though, is the fact that your ships share radar data. This means that in ideal circumstances, only one scout ship needs to actually spot an enemy ship, and all your other ships will then be able to see it and target it using the appropriate weapons. However, sharing these pings across ships makes the pinging ship a lot easier for the enemy to spot. It's sending a signal out, generating a more easily detectable signature as a result of the increased power usage, and so it might show up as a little ping on your enemy's radars too. At times, this might give away a ruse you're planning, or it might highlight your light scout ship's location to the enemy, allowing them to eliminate your ability to scout before you're able to bring your own strength to bear. In a simple scout versus scout situation, the one that's perpetually sharing data becomes easier to spot than the one that only turns data sharing on when absolutely necessary for target locks and navigation data. In a way, this simulates chatter between ships that are trying to lay low, coordinating positions as rough estimates before that radar data is shared at the last possible moment, potentially revealing the scout ship, yes, but by then, it's too late for the target to respond, since your other ships are already in appropriate positions to open fire. But it's not just a matter of flipping a switch on or off, of course. Like we touched on earlier, the actual exposed surface area of a ship also determines how easily it can be detected. In its simplest form, a smaller ship is harder to detect than a larger ship. But that's not all there is to it. Every ship has larger and smaller sides. At the wrong angle, a ship will expose more of itself to an enemy ship than it has to, making it easier to hit, yes, but also easier to spot. The largest side of your smallest ship might be bigger than the smallest side of your largest ship, so you shouldn't just be concerned with ship class and size as a generic measure of how easily it can be spotted, though it is a good indication. You actually need to worry about overexposing your ships, making them easy to spot. Naturally, you can use celestial bodies to help hide ships, and for that matter, missiles too, but be warned that some weapon systems can navigate around these celestial bodies and spot your signature independent of the ship from which it was launched. If you're hiding behind an asteroid, for example, and a scout ship has spotted you, any of the appropriately armed enemy ships can fire a radar-equipped missile, send it around said asteroid, and use its independent targeting system to track and hit you. The scout ship gave the firing ship a general idea of where the missile needs to lock, and the firing ship can then blind fire, letting the missile take control when it sees your ship after going around the asteroid. Every move has a potential counter, and this back and forth adds tension before the shots start to fire. And that's not all. There are two specific orders that are related to the radar equipment specifically that can help in a pinch. Burning through allows your radars to run on overdrive for a moment, potentially highlighting some targets if you're facing the right way, but potentially exposing your own ship too. On the flip side, jamming has a very interesting effect where rather than just hide the jamming ship, it sends a bunch of noise out. Rather than not seeing any pings, the enemy sees a bunch of pings all over the place, moving around, uncertain of what's real and what's just noise. Jamming doesn't just help hide one ship amidst all the noise, it can help hide a bunch of them, your entire fleet even, if used correctly. These orders, as well as illuminators to light up specific targets for use with specific types of weapons, can also be targeted, adding yet another layer of thinking and planning. Are you confident about where you're being spotted from? Do you think you've been spotted? Are the missiles coming your way relying on independent targeting systems? Can you spoof them? Are you maybe wasting your time giving useless orders where you should try to evade in a different sort of way? At any given time, you have a great many considerations to keep top of mind, and these considerations start well before an engagement even begins. They apply build to battle. The ship design process in Nebulous Fleet Command is as involved as you want it to be. With workshop support, players are able to share fleet designs, and you can use these shared designs as they are, or you can adjust them to fit your own playstyle, approach, chosen game mode, or the makeup of your team if you're playing more than a 1v1 multiplayer engagement. At its most minimal, you can just get familiar with the fleets the game comes with, but the level of customization available at its most is just insanity. Every fleet has a point cost, and you'll make every decision around that for when you're playing games with point limits. The first stage of making a ship from scratch is picking a hull. At present, there are 6 classes of hulls from one faction's set of designs, but at least one more faction's worth of designs are going to be added in as well. From smallest to largest, you've got the corvette, the frigate, the destroyer, the light cruiser, the heavy cruiser, and the battleship. Each of these classes comes with some lore, which for a lore nerd like myself is a nice touch, and each class has its strengths and weaknesses, as you might imagine. Smaller ships are harder to spot but easier to destroy, and their lighter mass means that you need less thrust to move them around and fight inertia. They'll have a smaller crew who will be more easily hurt too, and they'll have thinner armor as well as fewer slots for modules, compartments, and mounts. Each slot is of a certain size, and based on said size, you can choose from one of many components of a variety of designations, though you'll have to keep in mind how much crew and power any given part needs to operate. The mounts provide hardpoints for communications equipment, electronic warfare devices, radar, and weapons of varying types. Missile launchers can fire in pretty much any angle, but their ammunition determines how target acquisition happens. Some missiles have independent radar systems, as described earlier, able to find a lock independent of the launching ship as long as they're headed in the right direction, while other missiles need an illuminated target to head towards, while others still need the launching ship to maintain a lock until the target is hit. And some lock onto jamming signals instead. Point defense turrets and point defense missiles are used to shoot down incoming missiles, and they vary in accuracy over range and energy draw significantly, and they're only effective when they can actually point and shoot at incoming threats, at least in the case of point defense turrets. A PDT facing the wrong way can't shoot a missile down, so positioning them appropriately to get full coverage is essential. Projectile weapons like cannons and railguns fire solid projectiles at targets the ship can lock onto, but they need to be able to point at the target, meaning you need to be wary of limits on their rotation, and you need to adjust roll, pitch, and yaw accordingly in the middle of battle. They'll have varying accuracy at different ranges, so you'll want to figure out what optimal engagement ranges you're building for. Railguns can fire up to 20 kilometers away with reduced accuracy, while smaller cannons are limited to a maximum range of just 5 or so kilometers instead. Spinal weapons, meanwhile, typically fire out the nose in a very narrow direction, but cause a devastating amount of damage when they hit. Compartments are a separate category to mounts, and they refer to spaces inside the ship dedicated to command, medical facilities, additional crew, or utilities that help repair damaged components, as well as ammo stores and various sub-command centers to help improve the efficiency of your ship's reactors or targeting systems, etc., etc. Finally, modules are smaller systems that can be added to a ship to help with its operation and safety. Sprinklers that prevent fires from escalating into explosions at your ammo stores, ammo elevators that speed up reload times, reactor boosters and regulators to help with power management. These are all excellent examples of how the right modules can help keep your ship safe and operational. Signature scramblers can make smaller ships look like more valuable targets, while internal radar systems might be less accurate or efficient, but they don't take up an external mount. Track correlators and mount gyros can help increase accuracy of your turret fire, and they can also increase the rate of target acquisition too. With all these parts discussed, you can see how much variety is readily available in Nebulous Fleet Command, even in its pre-release state. The nuanced difference between effective ranges, power draws, crew prerequisites, projectile types, and the limitations between them can make ship and fleet customization an adventure of its own. Do you have a single massive battleship surrounded by a couple frigates? Do you avoid the larger classes to double down on the number of ships instead? Do you make light missile boats to pair with scouts? Do you put PDTs on every ship, or do you have ships dedicated to interception? The choices feel endless when playing solo, and if you're playing with a team, the options to specialize open up even more doors. But whether you're firing solid projectiles or scrambling your ship's signature, it all revolves around realism and immersion. While we don't necessarily know how combat in space will definitely look when it finally becomes a reality, there are many theories based on applicable physics and extrapolating from weapon systems that already exist. Nebulous Fleet Command clearly takes its inspiration from this much more grounded perspective, looking at how radar, guidance systems, CWIS, tactical data links, and naval combat works primarily. Mix all that with the physics of space and the previously discussed 6 degrees of freedom, and you've got everything you need to make a believable, tense set of mechanics that make you feel like you're in control of an actual fleet, and this is one of the biggest selling points of Nebulous Fleet Command, at least in my books. I think the simplest and yet most potent example of this is how an engagement actually begins. Your ships arrive at the location of the engagement, and you'll notice right away that they're facing the wrong way, so to speak. The ship is facing away from the direction it's headed, and its thrusters are going full blast. This is exactly how a ship would arrive at a destination in space, using its thrusters not to move towards the destination, but instead to reduce its velocity so it comes to a standstill at its final destination. After all, with minimal friction in space, this is how braking works. You thrust opposite to the direction of travel, bringing your velocity down to 0. Or perhaps up to 0, depending on your... Anyway, this might sound like a minor detail, but your ship begins battle facing away from the center, away from the direction you're most likely to find the enemy. If you have a nose-mounted weapon or turrets that can only fire forward, you need to flip your ship around. If you're going to move in any direction, you have to consider that your most powerful thrusters are facing the wrong way, so to speak. And as discussed earlier, the ships rely on the thrust generated by each of their thrusters to determine how quickly they can move in any particular way, whether it's adjusting roll, pitch, yaw, or accelerating in any particular direction. This same logic applies everywhere else. If you're burning forward at full speed and suddenly realize you've exposed yourself to the enemy and need to pull back, you can either maintain your heading and use weaker thrusters to kick into reverse, or you can get your ship to rotate so that the stronger thrusters are used to reverse velocity instead, all the while your existing momentum pushing you further out, potentially giving your opponent enough time to unleash a salvo and cause damage. These kinds of small details aren't immediately apparent, but they have a huge impact on how the game feels to play and the level of immersion it provides, forcing you to think not like you're flying jets or commanding boats or tanks, but space-faring vessels. You feel like you're in command of ships, spaceships, not of any terrestrial unit, not of anything you're super familiar with, but all these little details really come together alongside the visual details to make it feel like you're flying spaceships. And as you can probably tell, I love it. I absolutely love it. Now, these types of small details go further. The direction you take damage from will determine which components are more likely to get hit, and as components take damage, the efficiency of a ship is naturally reduced. Damage control teams will be dispatched and their movement is actually tracked. How long it takes them to get to a specific component depends on where they were when they started moving inside the ship. It depends on what kind of helpful upgrades you've installed for them and how far they have to go to repair the damaged component. Ammo stores can catch fire and be particularly dangerous, and the same applies to missile silos, and not keeping a check on which components are in need of repair and which are safe to face enemy fire will put you at a disadvantage against a more capable commander. But it goes beyond these micro-level details. A bunch of ships moving close to each other have a larger signature together, and a few small ships can look like a larger ship to detection equipment that doesn't have enough data to go on. This can be used to mislead the enemy, making them believe they've spotted a threat to hide from, pushing or baiting them into a trap. As discussed earlier, different weapon types can lock on to different types of signals using different guidance methods. Scare your enemy into jamming your radar, but then use missiles that track jamming signals to counter them. Fire the right salvo size to overwhelm PDTs without wasting ammo. Maybe fire some duds in the hopes to distract the PDT from more dangerous missiles. The options feel endless, and every action or inaction on your part has consequences, and with so many game systems that are built off of applicable real-world logic, you can quickly start to think about little tricks and strategies to keep your enemies on their toes. Of course, there are more or less efficient strategies, but never underestimate somebody who's willing to experiment. There's something ridiculously cool about ordering your ships into flank speed and pulling away from a missile salvo that you only just detected, watching your personal defense missiles auto-fire, hoping they make contact as you prepare for the worst. Seeing personal defense turrets fire halfway across the battlefield, tracking incoming missiles, thanking your past self for having such a well-designed ship in such an excellent hiding spot. Not only do the considerations for realism and immersion make the game work on a logical set of principles that you can build strategies around, it also looks and feels cool as hell. Mods, the dev plan, and what's next. The devs have some pretty wild plans for the game, starting with an early access launch slated for February 11th of next year, and that'll include everything you've seen and heard here, as well as a tutorial to explain how everything works. The tutorial is already in-game, and it's a solid, interactive tutorial, guiding you through the complexities very well. You'll be able to battle against the AI, which is quite capable, truth be told, at least until you really get a hang of the game's systems, and then you'll also be able to play multiplayer, which will likely be the primary way to play for many, at least until the single-player story campaign gets integrated further down the line. A few different game modes are available right at this early access point, from simply destroying each other's ships to holding key positions to rack up points to a sort of siege mode where one team defends a facility while the other attacks it. And another game mode that involves defending an escort is planned for soon after early access starts too. Shortly after the early access launch, we'll see the addition of more procedural maps, a ranking system, and win-loss tracking. This will come alongside AI improvements, music, and a second set of ship designs to match a second faction's aesthetic. And over the course of early access, we'll see the addition of carriers and fighters, customizable missiles, environmental hazards like moving asteroids and electrical storms, marine boarding to capture or destroy ships, and 2 new gameplay modes. The story campaign will be narrative-driven, centered around a civil war where a system is trying to secede, and you'll be leading a small task force amidst a much larger campaign where your progression keeps a track of your performance, following factors like ship status, munitions, etc., as you try to make an impact in the war. The developers have mentioned that they really want to try and impart the true scale of a solar system level conflict, and it's nice to see that the realism and grounded nature of the game will be retained for its campaign mode too. Without giving too many story beats away, you'll find yourself acting as a spec ops team of sorts, operating behind enemy lines to try and give your side the advantage in the war, and as a fan of a good war story, I am quite excited to see how it develops and plays out. The other game mode we can look forward to is the Solar System Conquest mode that can be played both in single player and multiplayer, where 2 teams will fight for control of a star system using a number of fleets that they'll be able to move around to engage as needed, presumably across countless locations spread across this entire system. This mode will have the same level of customization we've already touched on, but it'll also include having to manage supply lines, ship repairs that take them out of commission for prolonged periods, crew veterancy, and more such features that give a greater sense of scale than a single battle does. This sounds dope as hell to me, adding a broader strategic layer to a tactical layer that already has so much going for it. And if all that isn't wild enough, the game's mod support is rather extensive. There are already mod guides on the Steam page that show you how you can add your own factions. You can also see indications of how you can add your own ship hulls, your own components, munitions, and much, much more. The developer is big on modding, and Nebulous was built from the ground up with mod support in mind. So yes, it sounds like if you want to, say, make the Rossi and take on the Free Navy, it'll very much be possible. Naturally, things change over the course of development, so keep an open mind on that front. Some things will grow in scope, some things will shift, but at the end of the day, everything I've seen so far is insanely promising, and the devs have been very active in sharing updates on social media, which you'll find linked in the description down below too. Remember to wishlist the game on Steam if you're interested in it to help the devs out, and keep an eye out for that Feb 11 release date into early access. I've mentioned an upcoming game that I was looking forward to playing with the community, and this is the one I was talking about. I think there's a lot of fun to be had even in early access, and you can keep an eye on this channel to stay up to date with the game on the lead up to and after release too. On which note, for more news about Nebulous Fleet Command and strategy gaming in general, don't hesitate to subscribe. And as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.